Sean Campus. Good morning. Welcome to our coffee hangout. I hope everybody's having a good week. So I accidentally sometimes put myself on uh, on the screen, but we got it fixed up now. All right. So um, the topic today that I put down is stuck in your ways, and this comes to my mind because me and my son were driving to um, Fresno the other day, which is about a 45-minute hike from my house. Um, and so, and there, I usually set in my car, I set a cruise control so I don't get too excited and go over the speed limit. And I just set it to where it needs to be and I just ride, right? And so my son asked me, "Hey, Dad, tell me again what cruise control does." So, for those of you who are not familiar with cruise control or don't use a cruise control in your car, what it is it makes sure that you average the correct speed. In our newer cars, what happens is that if it detects somebody in front of you, then it kind of slows down um, your ride. But as soon as that person moves up to the side or there's nobody in front of you, then it advances or gets back up to the speed that you set it at. So whatever speed you set it at, it continues at. So it's useful because you're not just doing an emotional speed or you're not thinking. You set the speed already, and then you do that speed no matter what. If you're on the highway, it's super useful. Um, so I described that to him, but that's also actually how we kind of work as people. And so if you think about, how come I'm stuck in my ways? How come I can't change things in my life? Or maybe I've attempted to change things and now I'm a bit older, but somehow I end up with the same outcomes that are never really higher, a higher version of me. It's just I've failed as hard as I've ever failed, right? How does that happen? Well, we all kind of have that same cruise control mechanism inside of us, and what is it set at is probably the first question that we should consider. Well, your cruise control mechanism is set at whatever you started out with. So in high school, I wasn't very good um, at doing high school as far as like turning work in, um, getting good grades. Like that was not my thing, right? And so I wasn't good at that. So I can consider that as like one of the autopilots I started then, and then something that I will always kind of battle against or go back to constantly, right? At some rate or another. If I don't pay attention, we'll get to the undoing part later. But the important part is that that is an autopilot that got set early on in my lifetime, and all of us have something. And so it could even be in the common thing that I see is in relationships. There's an autopilot to it looking or feeling a certain way, and we accidentally like create that situation without us even paying attention. And so when you're cruising and you have it on cruise control without paying attention, you could just um, be on the speed that you set, and it will adjust or make its adjustments, but it's always going back to that same scenario. So it might look like, oh, I'm speeding up, or oh, I'm slowing down. If you leave it alone, it will go right back to that speed. So in your relationships or in your life, in your relationship to other things in your life, you'll go right back no matter how much you speed up or slow down, you or how much things get in your way or what things you put in your life. You'll go right back to that scenario that you've known the most, or that you set your autopilot to, you set your cruise control to. So we have that mechanism inside of us, and it keeps us stuck inside in our ways. It keeps us from ever having a different kind of life, or different kind of outcomes in our lives. So, what's the way to undo that situation? Well, the first thing is you have to be really conscious about your autopilot, and I think a lot of times they're hidden, and they're hidden because it's not like it's not like life has been so bad or bad enough, right? So, and that circumstances may be different for everybody, but a lot of times, like when I talk about my grade thing, my grade situations, that's not the worst thing that's happened in my life, that's happened. But if I didn't never paid attention to it, I wouldn't understand the reason that certain things are struggle for me now, right? So in your life, it could be as subtle as things that you even feel like, man, well, I had nothing to do with that situation. Maybe your parents were divorced, or let's say your parents weren't divorced. You had the perfect life, but it was always a struggle for you to um, understand like how to achieve without on the earning side of things, like we're working towards it. And so you're like, man, how come I don't know how to work towards having more, and I'm used to having more and I can't get to it, right? Well, what is that about? Well, what it's about is something got set in the beginning that you're not necessarily paying attention to. So the first step to being able to really change is become aware. And the easiest part is to go backwards. So you look at your behaviors and what it is that you're doing now, and you'll start seeing patterns. So if you notice that there's something going on that you don't like, you'll start seeing it. You can look at different things that you do and you can say, man, I'm actually always doing that kind of thing. Right. And you can date it probably all the way back to some pattern that you watched coming up. So while you're doing that assessment, don't make things evil, because if you try to make a villain out of an autopilot that got set, you're less likely to look at it. So you want to just pay attention to the idea that says, okay, that's where it started. All right. Now, once you're able to identify where it started, you could start thinking about, okay, what do I actually want to happen? So the visualization or the idea of being able to create a new image in your mind that has more of the end in mind than what started in the beginning is super powerful. The hardest thing is it's already it's competing against what's embedded already, right? So again, you have that autopilot. In order to take that off, in fact, we'll go to that car scenario that I was describing to my son. In order to take off your autopilot, one of the things that removes it, you could press the button, but sometimes there's no reason to press the button, right? We talked about that a second ago. But there's times where you're like, oh, I need to increase my speed, or I need to decrease my speed. It's not going well. I'm in a different zone, and I need to make sure the speed is different. Well, if we need to do that, all you have to do is hit the brakes, right? So in the car, all you have to do is hit the brakes, and then figure out, okay, what speed do I need to be at? Well, the construction zone says I need to be at 55, and there's barriers on both sides of me, and I don't like doing 70 in the barrier zone, right? So, okay, here's my new speed. And so you come up with that idea and then you set it to that, right? And so in life, it's very similar as far as looking at what's going on, figuring out what it is that you need, and then starting to know, okay, this is where I want to set it to, and then being able to set it to that scenario. The difference, I guess, that makes it a lot more challenging is you actually have to stay intentional about that visualization that you come up with. So whatever you come up with in your mind with, this is where I want to be, right? This is the things that I actually want to be doing in my life. Now you need to start matching habits and doing things in your life that mimic that scenario that you want to be a part of. Okay. And so you have to be really careful, because your body and your mind will be used to, and this is again the difference between you and the car, is your body's going to want to go back to whatever it knows the most, especially when things get challenging. When things get challenging, that's whenever you start resorting to the deepest held habits that you have experienced and have done in your life. That's just the way it works. So you actually have to be more conscious and active about what's going on in your life. You can't just wake up in the morning and then let life um, do you have to actually wake up and start doing life, right? So what are the things that you're going to start your day out with, and how are you intentional about changing this day around? And as soon as you let that habit slip, then again you're going to have to worry about going back to your old ways. So what are some things that will actually help increase that focus? Well, a huge deal is to be able to have somebody in your life that you can actually tap into that doesn't just allow you to live subconsciously, right? Like who's your partner in life that you can actually say to, like, hey, I actually need somebody to hold me accountable, or I don't necessarily want to be held accountable, but I want somebody to help me grow, and I want to get to a different space. And so if you put somebody in your life like that, it's going to be really helpful. The second thing is create routines around where you want to be instead of routines around your past habits, right? So if you get up doing the same things that you've always done, even if it seems noble, like even if it's, hey, I get up and get ready and I go to work every day, right? Even that will allow you to go back to some of the old ways that you've been into, just because it's not routine building towards where you want to be. Okay. So to me, those two things, if you can put routines in, that would be helpful. And then if you could also have somebody that could help you stay in a consciousness about the growth that you want to do, those two things would be really helpful. The third thing is um, is the concept of abundance. And so I've talked a lot of times on my channel about abundance, but I think we all need to know this. It's what happens when we are staying in the states of like, okay, today I'm just gonna follow the routine, right? I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna get ready, I'm gonna go to work, I'm gonna get off work, I'm gonna take kids home, da 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 da, right? When we stay in those scenarios, um, we're not really growing, right? Now, obviously, every day, might be different, but overall, if we're not thinking more of like, how's this, what are we growing here? What am I creating here? Then that's another reason or another way that we get stuck in our old ways, is that our body's going to look for whatever it's spiked in before, right? So whatever areas it spiked in before, it's going to look for that scenario. So let's say that you've had a hard time with paperwork. That was my scenario, right? So when all the calamity that goes in that scenario for me has always been like, that's the lowest point, and then I'm able to always get up from that scenario. Well, my body will seek that scenario, and I don't need to be doing that in my life. That's not something I need to be doing. For you to be a different scenario, it's not something you need to be doing in your life anymore. And in order for us to replace that avenue of attempted growth, where we're just repeating the same thing from an old day, um, in order for us to increase that or to get away from that, we need to put other things, in our life. Our body looks for abundance. Our body wants us to do more, and it doesn't like the idea that we would stop our physical growth, our mental growth, our emotional growth, or our spiritual growth. And all of those ways are available for us to be able to grow. And so I think the ultimate growth for us, you can look at all four of those ideas. How do I grow emotionally? What do I do to grow my mind? How do I grow physically? Like, we have a lot of things in place for that. I think for so many of us, there's a spiritual a spiritual growth that's really needed, and the more you can tap into that, then you stop being stuck in your ways, because you're not just in an autopilot type phase. Um, and you get connected to the highest version of you, and that's the most important part, right? So in all, I know that people, that all of us, we struggle to get out of the hardest things, and it's hidden, and next thing you know, we're sending ourselves messages of like not growth, even in areas that we're like, man, I would really like this situation to go well, and I would like to grow this scenario. All the old stuff starts coming back and flooding in just to keep us in the same spot. And I want you to challenge yourself to grow yourself using the things that we talked about. and allow yourself to be as great as you possibly can be. All right, you guys, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.